Hello everybody, John here, and today on To The Garage we're looking at the thorny topic of batteries and battery charging with the Jaguar XK8 XKR and 308 series of saloons. And we're going to look at everything there is to know about it. Not in excruciating detail, but in enough so that you guys have an appreciation of what to do and when. First thing first, the battery on the XK8 is in the rear of the car. Open up your boot lid, and in the boot there are two panels, the floor panel and the battery panel. Grab hold of your battery panel, lift it from the back edge and take it out. And therein lies the battery at the heart of your XK8 XKR 308 electrical system. We've talked about this a few times before, but it's worth repeating. It's almost like the channel's mantra, if I'm honest. If there is anything wrong with your XK8 XKR bar a flat tyre, your first question should be, could it be the battery? And if you don't immediately answer with, of course it isn't, then check the battery. The car is really sensitive to the condition of the battery, having a full charge, having the right battery, the charging system being in good condition. Anything that goes wrong with it will cause all manner of errors, false codes, locking system problems, ignition problems, window problems, gearbox problems, you name it. That is at the heart of most of the issues. Car batteries are not cheap items. In the UK, a battery for an XK8, which is an appropriate battery, will definitely cost you in excess of £100. You're talking about 100 to 120 generally. And something like this is sort of standard fare that you might get. Now, if you go to Fred Under the Shed garages and get your battery swapped, you may get something like this fitted. Now, this is a good battery, dirty, but that is the battery, believe it or not, of one of my vans. So, you know, it can start a significant vehicle. What it can't do is look after heavy drain whilst it's running and heavy drain whilst the car is parked. This can, and it needs to be physically large to have the capacity to do that. Let's have a look. Here's your average car battery. 12 volt, as almost all of them are going to be, and it says 50 AH, that's 50 amp hours, and 420, and that's the cranking amps. What that means is this battery can deliver 420 amps when it needs to, but not for long. It can deliver 50 amps for an hour, or 1 amp for 50 hours, doesn't matter. So if a vehicle has got some ongoing current when you park it up, this will last for 50 hours at 1 amp. This is an appropriate battery for your Jaguar. Here's the equivalent numbers for this particular battery. This one can run 100 amp hours. It has got twice as much the capacity to keep the systems running and live as the previous one, and can, when needed, do 830 amps. So you do need an expensive battery. Don't cut corners on this one. Get something that's recommended or specified, and get a decent brand name. I can't tell you what the decent brand names in your territory is, but if you live in the UK, Bosch is good, and I would imagine worldwide Yuasa will be popular. I believe, well, obviously it's a Japanese company, but I think Yuasa is probably a major supplier in the States. And you can see This one is a 12 volt 95 amp hour battery, so marginally less total capacity than the other battery I showed you, but is capable of 850 amps when it really needs to, just momentarily for starting. Many decent quality batteries will have one of these little windows on them, and this little window is a quick visual indicator as to the condition of the battery. It actually tells you a little bit more about the condition of the acid in it than it does about the charge, but it's a good clue. And there's usually a code. So you can see in here we've got a little window, and when you look down it, there's a green float on show. We look across to the code: green good, white bad, black, huh? That probably means that the float's gone wandering off. If we look at my nice Yuasa battery, this one's slightly more elegant. It has this sort of target looking thing. You can see there's a green surround and a red centre showing up very clearly there, and there's a code here, and that's OK. If the green disappears, it needs recharging. If it all goes red, it needs replacing. And that's basically a little float bobbing up and down and making the effect of changing the colour. And it's checking the specific gravity of the acid. Don't need to worry about what that's all about. It just means my battery, the acid is in good condition. It's capable of doing good things. Your battery terminal should be clean, and the connection should be very tight and firm. Should not be able to move the terminal on the post. You don't have to torque them up. These things are lead or something that is akin to lead, so quite soft. The bracket is obviously a lot harder. As long as you're pinching it to the point where you can't rotate it or move it manually, you're good. Note how clean they are. You often get a white furry build-up on battery posts. That is a corrosion that's very often associated with a bad connection. The arcing helps that corrosion occur, or it's been helped along by gases escaping from the battery not being vented, and again says the battery's either working hard or it's not vented properly. Something's not right. Keep those terminals clean, then you'll see things going wrong. Although most batteries are completely sealed units these days, still with the larger batteries and some of the higher class batteries, you still have a vent. This Yuasa battery has one. You should not, if you've got no vent, assume it's a bad battery or bad mate. That's not necessarily true. Technology is changing all the time. And there's a hole in the side here and a vent pipe. If it's a vented battery, your battery will come with this pipe and this elbow. If you've got that elbow, it's very important that the pipe is not left to dangle inside the car. That's because the very gases we talked about, which can cause corrosion and explosions under the wrong circumstances, will come out of that pipe. There is a grommet intended for the purpose just there that the pipe should be pushed through. That takes the gases out under the car. If you have a voltmeter and you'd like to use that to have a look at the charge in your battery, the voltage that's in it, then get your voltmeter set to direct voltage. Normally you have direct or DC and alternating current. Alternating is a V with a wiggly line symbol up and down, alternating, and the direct or DC is two straight lines. Sometimes one of them is dotted. And you want to select something up to 20, up to 30, because you're expecting somewhere between 10 and maybe 15 volts. The engine's turned off, obviously. I have a red probe and a black probe. My black probe goes on the negative or earth terminal of my battery, and the red probe can go on the positive terminal of the battery. And what we get is 12.96 volts, and that's very standard. A really good battery will hold about 13 volts when it's been standing for a little while. As we know, it's called a 12 volt battery. If it really was down to 12 volt, 12.0 volts, there's not a lot left there to start the car. It needs 12 volts to start, and it's got to run a lot of other systems as well, and it's not generally a good sign. So well above 12 is where you'd like it to be. While we've got the multimeter, I'd just like to show you something that will make things make sense a little later. If I touch my negative onto the battery here and then measure the voltage again, 12.46 now. And you do get a fluctuating reading with the XK8 because it's got systems working all the time. It could be using a bit of current. But at the moment it's 12.47. Okay, I'm going to take my negative probe and take it off the battery and connect it instead to the clamp that holds the spare wheel in. 12.46. Same. This is interesting. So the negative terminal of the battery goes through this cable to the bodywork. So if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, apologies, but it's not obvious to everybody. The negative side goes to the bodywork. Everything in the car that is made of metal is potentially connected to the negative side of your battery, which means that the bracket that is holding down the spare wheel is screwed into the boot floor, is connected to the negative side of my battery. So I only need to have positive wires going to things, and then the battery can get its juice back, if you want to think about it like that, completing the circuit by just going out the other side to anything made of metal. And that's what we call a negative earth vehicle. This is my battery charger. Years ago it was quite a posh one. Nowadays it's pretty outdated, but it's representative of a decent quality battery charger. It's capable of doing all sorts of clever things, but it is also known as a trickle charger, meaning it can be connected to the car for very long periods. Many people obtain battery chargers from a company called CTEK, CTEK, I believe. Very good battery chargers, very small, and they are perfectly equipped and made for the job of charging your vehicle over a long period of time. Recommend those. Now, if I want to charge the battery in my car, I might not want to disconnect the battery because of worrying about losing codes and all sorts of other things. And it's okay to charge it while it's all connected up. How should I go about doing that? Well, first of all, I take the red lead off my battery charger. This is not plugged in. Red lead off my battery charger, and I put it onto my positive terminal. Always denoted with some red, always denoted with a plus sign. Then I connect second my negative lead to my negative terminal, and I can do that, and that's fine, and that will work. But it's really good practice not to connect this directly to the negative terminal of the battery. What I will do is I'll connect it to this. That is earth, as is anything else that's bare metal in the vehicle. That is exactly the same as connecting it here. So why would I do that? Why would I connect it over there? Remember we talked about the vent pipe on this battery. If this battery was working hard and slightly damaged and generating a lot of gas, that gas would be hydrogen gas. And this spare wheel well and area around the battery would have some hydrogen gas in it. When I touch this on to the terminal, there is a chance for a very small spark. The further away from the battery you are when that very small spark occurs, if this area was full of dangerous gas, the least dangerous it is. So it's a good idea to start connecting up earth last and earth away from the battery. Even though my voltmeter has told us that we've got a decent, if not spectacular, amount of volts in this battery, my battery charger, which is a smart charger, has a button I can press, and I very much doubt you're seeing it on screen, that tells me what percentage of the battery condition is there, and it says 40 when I press it. And remember, this is still not plugged in. So I've got 40% of the performance in this battery that I should have. So I could consider charging it. So what I would do now is, now that it's all connected, now I would plug it in and turn it on. i.e., the chances of sparks are massively remote. Once I've finished charging the battery, what I would do is unplug it from the mains, turn this off, and then disconnect the leads. And again, what I would do is I would reverse the sequence. The earth is the first off now, followed by the positive. So connecting, positive goes on, that's fine, and the earth always goes on last. And I can connect it here, that would work. Good practice is to connect to something away from the battery, and this is a genuine use of this clamp. It's why it's metal, it's why it's there, and is recommended by Jaguar. Another popular question is, how do I jump start my XK8? So I'm going to show you the proper procedure. First of all, decent jump leads. Mine are very barely adequate. The stronger and thicker the cable, the better. You don't want anything delicate for this task. Next, in an ideal world, you'd have a jumping battery, a booster if you like, which is totally disconnected from any vehicle. That is the best, safest, most professional way of doing this. So, battery out of a car, next to the boot of your car. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your positive lead and you're going to connect it to your positive terminal of your booster battery. I've then got my other lead, which is the positive end, and that's going to go onto the positive, not scratch my paint, in the boot. Sparks and spikes in the electrical supply are our constant enemy. So this is why you're doing it this particular way round. At the moment, there is absolutely no risk. Those two are connected positive to positive, but they're not connected negative to negative. And even if this touches anything, including anything metal, it won't do anything because the other end isn't connected. So we want to put that down on top of the fuse box. We go to the battery, we connect up the negative end, give them a wriggle to get a good contact, and as per previously, positive on first, this is the one that goes on last, and we would go away from the battery and we go to this clamp. Again, minimising the risk of any sparks or any spikes. If my car wouldn't start, I would now leave it like that for 3 or 4 minutes to allow the batteries to equalise a little, because this one would be taking the juice from this one, and after a few minutes then I would try and start my car. Once I've got it running, I would leave it like this, idling for a few more minutes, and in an ideal world turn off the engine and then disconnect the batteries in that same reverse order of take the earth off first. Once I've got that earth off, I'll take that earth off, then take the positives off, and we're all safe, spark free, no hazards have occurred. There may be emergencies that you find yourself in where you need to disconnect with the engine running. You're too scared to stop it because it won't restart. If that's so, then again, be careful, disconnect earth first and make sure that nothing touches. Beware of sparks. If you had to complete this task with the battery still in the car that you're going to boost from, then that's again completely legitimate. You can do that. But for this vehicle, it's really strongly recommended that the boosting vehicle is not running. Turn it off and use the 2 batteries the way that I've just described there. So the reason for that is the boosting vehicle will have an alternator. On its own, it's probably putting a small amount of current into its own battery. When it detects this huge battery and the fact that it's drained, its alternator will go mental and will push out a lot of amps because it thinks that its own battery has suddenly lost a lot of power. That will give a big belt in the energy going over, but also presents the Jaguar with more amps than it necessarily wants at that point. And then you go and try and start it. That is sending a signal back to the other car that it's going to really confuse it. The 2 alternators essentially start talking with each other, and before you know it, something's fried, usually in this, because for its year, this was a very sophisticated car electronically, and it's got more things to fry than most of the cars that you're going to attach it to. There is another scenario we should address, and that is, for whatever reason, you've got a flat battery, you can't open your boot lid because the button is obviously electrically operated and won't release the boot lid. Your remote can't release the boot lid. And for whatever reason, you've neglected your secret keyhole, and that doesn't work either. The perfect storm of problems. How then are you going to start your car or charge the battery or open the boot lid? That's where this little trick comes in. So I brought my voltmeter round just as an aid to understanding. So under the bonnet of your XK8, on the left hand side as you're looking forward, there's a suspension turret and there's a black box in front of it. And this black box has two clips you can squeeze, and you lift it up, and that's one of your mini fuse box and relay boxes. You put the lid back on that, you won't be needing to be in there. But now you know where we are, just to the right hand side as I'm looking at it on here is a rubber cap. And when I lift that rubber cap, what we find is a heavy cable, and that is a positive cable under the bonnet. I'm also going to lift one of the plastic covers off this turret mount, and as we've discussed previously, if it's made of metal and it's touching the bodywork of the car, it is negative. It's the earth of the vehicle. You don't need to find the other end of the battery cable. So we've got the negative and we've got the positive. So negative and positive. Positive usually denoted by red. Put my red onto that terminal. Again, just good practice, doesn't matter in this particular circumstances, but I'm going to go for the earth last. Touch on there, 12.33, and that makes sense because between where the battery is and here, the battery will be using up some of its voltage across things like stuff as basic as the clock in the car. So I have this alternate battery point, if you like. What you should never do is use these two terminals to try to start your car. If you've got a flat battery and a car won't start, do not put jump leads on these two and then try and start the car. There is too many fuses that can get blown and sensitive items that this is going to confuse. It is going to cause you problems. Do not do it. What you can do with these two terminals is get an alternative battery, even if it's in a car, connect to your battery, and then use your jump leads to connect up using the same principle as we've discussed. Positive, and I've got the battery on the ground to negative over there. Don't allow those two leads to touch each other, and then like that your boot release will be able to operate because you're connected to another battery, and you should be able to open your boot and go to the back and do all the operations the correct way. Once you've opened your boot, take off the negative first, then the positive, and make safe at the other end. Another legitimate use of these two is if you have a small long-term charger such as a CTEK trickle charger. You may find this a more convenient spot from which to charge the vehicle long term. And as long as it is a low power charger, then these two can be used to keep your vehicle topped up. And what some people will do is use this point and this point to run a couple of cables to a more convenient spot so that they can plug in their long-term charger using the engine bay rather than the boot. For me, I would just keep these for reserve. This is where you go when you've run out of possibilities and you can't get into the boot. So just to reiterate, never use these to jump start to get your car going. You will fry the electrics. Well, there we are. That's a very simple introduction to charging and batteries associated with the XK8. If you want to go a lot more in depth, then there's probably other people better suited on the internet, on YouTube, to help you understand in more depth what's going on with the charging system, how to do some of the more sophisticated tricks. But if you remember nothing else from this, remember just a couple of things. When you're connecting up your terminals using jump leads, connect earth last and disconnect earth first. So it's the last thing you put on and the first thing you put off. If at all possible, connect the earth away from the battery. It's just good practice and keeps you safer in the event of very, very rare circumstances where you get a little bit of a flash. Next, if you're going to use the underbonnet terminals, only use them to charge the battery very slowly or to release the boot lid. Do not use it to start the car. Because the battery's in the boot, make sure that your emergency key, your secret keyhole, works in the boot lid so that you can always get in there even when the electrics are out. Use the appropriate battery, don't cheapskate on it. Yes, you are going to get through a battery every 2 to 3 years with an XK8. They consume juice when they're not even turned on, when they're in the garage. It does start to wear them down. It's a consumable cost. Just got to grin and bear it. Don't use a cheap battery. You will regret it. It will cause the car to break down on you. It causes all manner of faults. And the site's mantra, unless it's a punctured tyre, whatever's gone wrong is probably your battery. Only when you go, don't be stupid, I can see the exhaust, it's fallen off, are you allowed to think anything other than it's the battery. So hopefully that was quite helpful. See you guys again very soon on to the garage, where we'll be doing some more secrets of the XK8 and some more modern maintained stuff on Purdy, bringing her up to a really good standard and getting rid of some of the little foibles and issues that she's got at the moment. Thanks for subscribing, guys. See you soon.